Hello. So now we're going to do this example here. We're going to add -2 plus -3. Okay. So as we've been doing, we're going to start by drawing our number line. Okay. And we're going to see that, aha. Well, let me first draw in these numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to put in some here for good measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say. Okay. So as before, we're going to follow the rules very systematically and carefully. As we look at this sum going from the left to the right, we're going to first draw our arrow that represents the number 2 with its tail starting at the 0. So it's going to be here. And again, since it's -2, it's going to go here with its point landing on the -2. So this arrow represents the -2. And then what we're going to do, as per rule number 2, is we're going to place an arrow that represents the second term in our sum, the -3, but in such a way that the tail of that arrow begins where the point of the first arrow ends, like this. Okay. And we're going to 1, 2, 3 to the left, right? So 1, 2, 3, right? So this arrow represents -3. And then what is the sum? We first draw the arrow that represents the sum by placing the tail of it exactly where the tail of the first arrow was, which was at the 0, and by placing the head of the arrow, or the point of the arrow, where the point of the second arrow ended up. In this case, -5. So you can see that this represents this arrow represents the value -5. And so how can we interpret this situation? We can say, therefore, that -2 plus -3 is -5. Okay? Okay. And I want you to notice how in this case, both the arrows were going in the same direction. So the resulting arrow that we got by essentially combining them also went in the same direction. And we can remember that the arrow being left means negative. So if we have these two negative numbers and we're adding them, we get a negative, right? And also the length. The length of the two arrows here are 2 and 3 respectively. The length of this arrow is 5. Aha. Isn't that interesting? 2 plus 3 is 5. Could the length of this arrow be the sum of the lengths of these arrows? Okay, something to think about. Of course, that's what I'm getting at, right? Let's do another example like this one, and then we're going to proceed to some more examples, and we're going to formalize our discussion in a little bit. Okay. So now here, let's do this example together. Okay. So, and again, look at the way I'm applying the rules. I first of all look at the sum from left to right. I see that the first number, as I'm looking at the sum from left to right, is the -3. So I'm going to draw my arrow that represents -3 with the tail at the 0. So in this case, I place my tail at the 0, and since it's -3, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 hops to the left, so that the so that the point of the first arrow, the arrow representing the first number, lands on the -3, right? So this is the arrow that represents the -3. Now, what am I going to do? I'm going to place an arrow representing the second number, in this case the -4, above the first, but in such a way that the tail starts where the point of the first arrow, the arrow representing the first number, ends up, right? So right there, right? And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So like this. Like this. Right? So that's -4. So, and then of course, how do we get the sum? We place an arrow that will represent the sum. We place the arrow starting with the tail where the first one started, and where the head of this one ends up where the head of the other one ended up, like this. So that is the arrow representing the sum of these two arrows. It represents the number -7. You can see that. right? And so the way we interpret this, as we saw before, is that negative 3 plus negative 4 is negative 7. Okay. And so I think you guys can kind of see the pattern here, right? You can start to see it forming in your brain with these examples. And again, the reason why I'm using simple numbers like 3s and 4s and small numbers and simple numbers, no fractions, no decimals right now, is not because the rules we're going to get are not going to be applicable to those numbers. In fact, they are going to be applicable to those numbers. But by using these simple numbers, these numbers that are very easy to visualize, very easy to draw, it'll make it easier for us to draw the intuition we then need, so that we can then apply it in the situation where it's more difficult. Okay, so now we're going to proceed to a few more examples. Thank you.